The sky above the contested skyland was a war zone, a roiling mass of storm clouds, illuminated intermittently by lightning forks, casting brief, harsh light onto the chaos below. Airships darted and wheeled like predatory birds, their engines groaning against the turbulent winds as cannon fire shattered the charged atmosphere. Elara Voss stood rigid on the bridge of the flagship, the wind tugging at her dark braid and the cold sting of rain mingling with the grime on her weathered face. She was every inch the leader now, eyes sharp, scanning the volatile battlefield with a mixture of calculation and fierce determination. The flickering glow of navigational displays cast eerie shadows across her features, highlighting the tight line of her jaw and the slight tremor in her hands that she refused to acknowledge. "Hold formation," she commanded, her voice cutting through the static-laden comms. "Focus, fire on the Eastern Winkow's flagship is weakening." Her words were met with a chorus of acknowledgements and the clatter of weaponry shifting targets. Beside her, Yarick Thorn leaned into the rail, sun-bleached hair plastered to his forehead, a scarred hand gripping the edge as he shouted encouragement to the pilots. The battle surged and swayed like a living storm. Explosions blossomed in fiery bursts, sending shockwaves that rattled the bones. The crew fought with everything they had, their faces etched with strain and resolve. Mira Solon worked feverishly below decks, her slender fingers coaxing the ancient technology back to life, providing crucial tactical advantages. Torin Vex barked orders to security teams, repelling boarding parties with brutal efficiency. Amid the cacophony, Elara's mind flashed back to the disaster that had defined her past, the catastrophic miscalculation that had shattered her reputation. Now, every decision bore the weight of that memory, driving her to push beyond fear and self-doubt. "Yarick now," she called, seizing the moment as the enemy flagship faltered. With a coordinated surge, their fleet closed in, unleashing a barrage that tore through Kael's defenses. The enemy flagship shuddered, sparks flying from its mechanical arm as it was raked by fire. But victory was not without cost. Across the fleet, ships burned and fell, and cries of the wounded pierced the storm's roar. The deck beneath Elara's boots was slick with rain and spilled oil, the faces of fallen comrades haunting her gaze. Lena Oris relayed urgent reports of casualties, her usually steady voice breaking, as the enemy flagship exploded in a final, brilliant flare. Signaling the collapse of Captain Riven Kael's command, a heavy silence fell over the surviving vessels. The storm began to abate, leaving a bruised sky streaked with fading lightning. The crew gathered on the deck of the flagship, their expressions a painful mixture of relief and mourning. Elara moved among them, offering quiet words, her own throat tight with grief. Kesmarlo clung to her side, eyes wide with the rawness of loss, yet bright with hope. Garrick stood apart for a moment, staring out over the reclaimed Skylander, battered but victorious prize. "We did it," he said finally, voice rough. "But at what price?" Elara nodded solemnly. "We honor those we lost by holding this ground, by building something better. This is only the beginning." As dawn broke, the first golden rays pierced the dispersing clouds, casting a hopeful light over the battered fleet. Elara and Yarick shared a brief, wordless moment of understanding, the fragile trust and bond forged in the crucible of battle. The horizon promised new challenges, but also the chance for redemption, for a future shaped by courage and unity. The victory was bittersweet. Skyfold's skies were quieter now, but the war for its soul was far from over. Elara's heart steeled itself for the trials ahead, knowing that to lead was to carry both the burden of loss and the spark of hope within the same breath, prepare for repairs, Elara ordered softly, eyes fixed on the rising sun. "And ready the crew. Skyfold needs us still." The campaign had reached its turning point. The lost Skylands were reclaimed, but the price paid would echo in every flight yet to come. And as the wind whispered through the masts and rigging, it carried with it the promise of new dawns and new storms. The skies were theirs, but the future remained unwritten. Elara Voss stood silently on the deck of the lead airship, the horizon painted in muted tones of dawn. The reclaimed Skylands stretched before her, vast and still, their jagged edges softened by the early light. The silence around her was profound, broken only by the low hum of the ship's engines and the occasional creak of rigging swaying in the gentle breeze. It was a silence heavy with loss and cautious hope, the kind that only follows a hard-won victory. Behind her, the crew moved with quiet purpose, tending to their wounded and repairing the scars left by the fierce battle. Torrin Vex barked orders to the security teams, his broad frame cutting a commanding figure even in the subdued atmosphere. His piercing blue eyes scanned the horizon, alert despite the brief reprieve. Nearby, Myra Solon carefully sorted through salvaged pieces of ancient technology, her slender fingers tracing the delicate mechanisms as if to unlock secrets still whispered by the lost Skylands. Her pale silver hair caught the faint light as she worked, casting a ghostly glow. In the council chamber aboard the flagship, the atmosphere was charged with tension. Representatives from the various political factions gathered around a heavy oak table, their faces etched with exhaustion and suspicion. Heated voices rose and fell, accusations and demands tossed like weapons in the confined space. Yet beneath the surface, there was an unspoken understanding. The battle had changed everything. The fragile balance of power in Skyfold was no longer what it had been. Slowly, grudgingly, the factions agreed to a ceasefire, recognizing the expedition's claim over the contested territories. The air was thick with distrust, but also with the tentative threads of diplomacy weaving a new, uncertain peace. Below decks, Elara found a rare moment of solitude. Yarrick Thorn sat across from her, nursing a bruised shoulder. His usual brash demeanor was tempered by fatigue, replaced by a quiet vulnerability that few had seen. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the unspoken bond between them spoke louder than any words. The battle had tested their leadership, their trust, and their mettle, and though scars remained, so did a growing respect. They exchanged weary smiles, small gestures that hinted at an alliance forged, not just in necessity, but in shared survival. Meanwhile, Lino Oris worked diligently at the communications console, her fingers flying over the controls as she intercepted and decoded transmissions. The signals were sparse, but significant whispers of unrest, movements of mercenary bands, and subtle shifts in faction allegiances. Her sharp eyes flicked between screens, alert to every nuance that might signal new threats or opportunities. The peace was fragile, and the skies of Skyfold remained as unpredictable as ever. Elara's thoughts drifted back to the cost of their victory. The faces of fallen comrades haunted her, their sacrifices etched into the fabric of the reclaimed Skylands. Yet, beneath the weight of grief was a spark, a fierce, unyielding hope. The expedition had not only secured territory, but had reshaped the future of Skyfold. Ancient technologies uncovered by Myra hinted at untapped potentials, while the uneasy alliances formed in the wake of battle promised new paths forward. As the sun climbed higher, casting light on the floating countenance's vast expanse, Elara felt a stirring within her, a renewal of purpose. The road ahead would be fraught with challenges, political intrigue, and the ever-present dangers of the skies. But she was no longer the disgraced navigator of the past. She was a leader, tempered by fire and forged in the crucible of conflict. The chapter closed on a horizon filled with both shadows and promise. The fragile piece, a delicate thread holding the future of Skyfold in balance. In the quiet aftermath, Elara and her crew prepared to face whatever storms might come, united by the trials behind them and the uncertain dawn before them. Elara Voss stood alone on the deck of the flagship, the vast expanse of the floating continents, skies stretching endlessly above her. Stars spattered the heavens like scattered jewels, their cold light piercing the darkness. Her eyes, sharp and searching, traced the familiar constellation's anchors in a sea of shifting clouds and uncertain futures. Yet tonight they offered no solace. Instead, her mind was a tempest of recollections, memories of that fateful day when her reckoning began. She inhaled deeply, the cold air filling her lungs as her fingers trembled slightly against the brass of the ship's railing. The echoes of her past failure reverberated in her chest. The miscalculation that had cost lives, shattered trust, and cast her into disgrace. The weight of that error had settled like a stone in her heart. Yet now, standing beneath the endless sky, she knew she could no longer carry it alone. Turning away from the stars, Elara descended the narrow stairs to the common room where the crew gathered. The chatter hushed as she entered, eyes turning toward her, some wary, others curious, a few tinged with unspoken doubts. The room was dimly lit by lanterns that swung gently with the ship's motion, casting flickering shadows against the worn wood. Mira Solon was seated near the navigation table, her silver hair catching the light like spun metal. Torin Vex stood near the doorway, his piercing blue eyes never leaving Elara's face. Taking a steadying breath, Elara stepped forward, her voice breaking the silence. "There's something I need to say." Her words carried the weight of years, forged in regret and tempered by resolve. "I have not always been the leader you deserve. My past mistakes nearly cost us everything." A hush fell over the room. The air was thick with tension, the kind that precedes either fracture or unity. Elara's gaze swept across the faces before her, the cautious hope in Yorick's eyes, the quiet understanding in Myra's expression, the stoic patience of Torin. "I was reckless once," she continued, "and that recklessness nearly ended this journey before it began. But I have learned. I have fought to earn your trust, and I vow to lead this expedition with all I have left." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Yarick Thorn stepped forward, his rugged frame casting a long shadow in the lantern light. His sun-bleached hair was tousled, and the scar over his left eye seemed to deepen as he fixed her with a steady gaze. "You're carrying a lot, Elara," he said gruffly, his voice rough but sincere. "But maybe it's time you stopped carrying it alone. We're with you, all of us." The room relaxed, the tension easing like a storm passing over distant clouds. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crew, a tangible shift in the air. Elara felt the walls around her heart begin to crumble, replaced by a fragile but fierce hope. Myra stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "Your honesty is a strength, Elara. It reminds us that leadership isn't about perfection, it's about courage, even when you're scared." Torin nodded, crossing his arms. "We've all got our ghosts. What matters is how we face them together." Elara's eyes glistened with unshed tears, but this time they were not of sorrow. They were of gratitude and newfound resolve. She moved to the navigation table, spreading out the ancient maps that had guided them thus far. The worn parchment was a tapestry of uncharted territories and forgotten secrets, the very essence of their perilous quest. "Look here," Elara said, tracing a jagged line with a steady finger. This is where we make our stand. The Lost Skyland, the heart of our mission. We face dangers ahead, storms, enemies, our own fears, but we will face them as one. Garrick leaned in, his usual bravado tempered by respect. Lead us there, Elara. We follow you. A sense of unity settled over the group as fingers traced the routes, voices low but resolute. The hum of the airship's engines thrummed beneath their feet, a steady heartbeat echoing their shared determination. As the night deepened, Elara allowed herself a moment to reflect. The reckoning with her past was not an end, but a beginning, a crucible through which she would forge not only her own redemption, but the future of Skyfold itself. The fragile trust she had earned was a beacon amid chaos, a promise that together they could chart a new course among the shifting skies. The dawn would come soon, and with it the challenges that awaited. But for the first time in a long while, Elara Voss felt ready to meet them, head held high, heart unburdened, and spirit unyielding. And so, beneath the vast canvas of the morning sky, the campaign moved forward, a testament to courage, trust, and the unbreakable bonds forged among the clouds. The story was far from over, but the reckoning had been made. Elara Voss stood at the bow, her lean silhouette framed against the awakening horizon. The vast expanse of reclaimed territories stretched beneath her gazer, testament to trials endured, battles fought, and a fragile peace, hard won. Around her, the stirring crew gathered, their faces alight with a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration, ready to chart the next chapter of their journey. "We've come far," Elara began, her voice steady but carrying the weight of everything they had overcome. "But this is just the beginning. The skies beyond these lands hold secrets and challenges we've only just begun to glimpse." A murmur of agreement rippled through the group. From the seasoned veterans to the fresh-faced apprentices, the crew felt the pull of the unknown, the call to explore the shifting borders and uncharted currents of Skyfold. Near the navigation chamber, Kesmalo sat hunched over a spread of star charts and ancient maps, her youthful face illuminated by the soft glow of lantern light. Mira Solon leaned in beside her, offering guidance but allowing the eager apprentice to lead the interpretations. Kess's fingers traced constellations with reverence, her bright eyes reflecting the wonder of discovery. "Look here," Myra said softly, pointing to an obscure marking that had escaped notice. "This could be a route to the northern reaches territories, lost to time, but ripe with potential." Kess nodded, determination tightening her jaw. "If we can navigate those currents, we might unlock the secrets that have eluded even the greatest explorers." Meanwhile, in the ship's galley, the atmosphere was markedly lighter. Yarrick Thorn and Elara exchanged stories, their laughter echoing against the wooden beams. The tension that had once marked their interactions had softened, replaced by a growing trust forged in shared hardship. "You ever think about what comes after all this?" Yarrick asked, swirling a cup of steaming brew. Elara smiled, the lines of fatigue softened by genuine warmth. "Every day, I think about the Skyfolds we haven't charted yet, the alliances we need to build, and the legacy we leave behind." "Sounds like you're ready to lead us into that future," Yarrick said, a rare note of respect in his voice. Across the deck, Torin Vex stood sentinel, his broad frame steady against the breeze. His piercing blue eyes scanned the horizon, alert for any sign of threat. The scars that marked his skin were badges of survival, but his gaze was fixed firmly on the peace they had fought to establish. As the crew gathered later that day in the Great Hall, Elara outlined the plans for expansion. The goals were ambitious: to chart new skylands, secure alliances with distant factions, and uncover the ancient technologies hinted at by Myra's discoveries. This was a campaign not only for territory but for the future of Skyfold itself. Kes stepped forward, her voice carrying the quiet confidence she had begun to nurture. "I'm ready to take on more responsibility. Elara has taught me much, and I want to help guide us through what lies ahead." A hush fell over the room as eyes turned to her. Elara's heart swelled with pride, not just for Kes's growth, but for what it symbolized: the passing of the torch, the promise of continuity. "You have my full support," Elara said, placing a hand on Kes's shoulder. "The future belongs to those brave enough to claim it." The days that followed were filled with preparations and strategy sessions. The crew worked tirelessly, fueled by a shared sense of purpose and the exhilarating possibility of discovery. The fragile peace they had won was a foundation, not a destination. As twilight descended, Elara found herself once more at the bow, the cool air whispering round her. Beside her, Kes joined quietly, their eyes meeting in the dimming light. "What do you see?" Elara asked. "Possibility," Kes replied, a bright smile breaking through. "A future waiting to be written." Elara nodded, the weight of past failures lifting, replaced by a hopeful determination. The skies of Skyfold stretched infinite and inviting an uncharted expanse where every horizon held a new beginning. And so, with the wind at their backs and the stars to guide them, the expedition set its sights on new horizons, ready to face whatever challenges the shifting skies would bring. She stood rigid on the deck of the flagship, the wind biting against her weathered face, tugging at the edges of her dark braid. The distant rumble of thunder rolled across the horizon, a low growl that seemed to echo the unease in her chest. Despite the triumph of reclaiming these lost territories, an unshakable shadow lingered. The fragile peace was only a veil, a thin curtain stretched across the precarious balance of power in Skyfold. Around her, the crew moved with quiet purpose, their faces etched with exhaustion, but also with a simmering determination. Yarek Thorn approached, his tall frame casting a long shadow in the setting sun, the familiar scar over his left eye catching the fading light. "Storm's coming," he said gruffly, voice low but steady, "and not just the weather." Elara nodded, eyes never leaving the distant clouds that churned like restless beasts. "We've won the Skylands, but the skies themselves don't belong to anyone yet." Inside the ship, the hum of machinery and the sharp beeps of instruments filled the cramped communications room where Lena Oris worked diligently. The glow from the screens reflected in her sharp eyes as she intercepted a coded transmission. The message was brief but clear. New players were eyeing the reclaimed territories, sending signals laced with veiled threats and promises of power. Lena's fingers danced across the console, decoding the transmission with practiced ease. Her face tightened as she realized the implications. "They're not finished with us," she murmured, eyes flicking up to Elara, who had just entered. "Then neither are we," Elara replied, voice steady but tinged with the weight of responsibility. In the observation cabin, Elara and Yarek shared a rare moment of quiet. The tension between them softened by the understanding forged through countless battles and close calls. The dim light cast long shadows across the walls, and outside, the wind whispered warnings through the rigging. "We've come far," Yarek said, voice rough but sincere. "But I don't think this is the end of it." Elara met his gaze, the fierce determination in her eyes matching his own. "No, it's just the beginning." Beyond the ship, Tauren Vex patrolled the perimeter of the newly established camp. His broad shoulders were tense beneath his worn leather armor, piercing blue eyes scanning the encroaching shadows beneath restless clouds. The soft thud of his boots was the only sound as he moved like a ghost across the soft turf. every sense alert to the slightest disturbance. He knew the crew was vulnerable now, the hard-won victory a beacon that would attract enemies lurking in the dark corners of Skyfold. Tauren's grip tightened on the hilt of his weapon as a faint rustling caught his attention. The shadows seemed to pulse with unseen movement, and a cold shiver ran down his spine. Skyfold's skies were no longer just a battlefield. They were a hunting ground, and the hunted must be ready. Back aboard the flagship, Elara gathered her key officers, Myra Solon, Lena Oris, Tauren Vex, and Yorick Thorn in the strategy room. The air was thick with the scent of oil and parchment, the walls lined with maps and charts, illuminated by flickering lamps. "We've reclaimed the Skylands," Elara began, voice carrying the weight of command. "But our enemies won't rest. We face not just rival factions, but shadows that move unseen." Mira nodded solemnly, fingers tracing the ancient lines on a map. "I've been studying the artifacts we recovered. There are technologies here that could shift the balance of power if we understand them before others do." Lena added, "I intercepted messages from groups we hadn't encountered before. They're well organized, well funded. Political puppeteers pulling strings from the shadows." Yorick cracked his knuckles, a rare sign of tension. "Let them come. We'll be ready." Tauren's voice was steady, a rock amidst uncertainty. "We hold the line. But we need to be vigilant. The crew, the ships, the Skylands, no weak links." Elara looked around at the faces she trusted most. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but it was theirs to walk. "We've weathered storms, betrayal, and battle. We'll face whatever comes next together." As the meeting broke, Elara lingered at the window, watching the horizon where the storm gathered. Lightning forked through the sky, illuminating the floating isles in stark relief. The air thrummed with electric promise, a reminder that, in Skyfold, peace was never permanent, and the fight for survival was unending. Below deck, Kesmarlo practiced her navigation drills under Mira's watchful eye. The young apprentice's hands steady despite the storm outside. Myra's calm voice guided her through complex star charts and ancient coordinates, a beacon of hope for the future of exploration. "You're learning quickly," Mira said, a rare smile softening her features. "One day you'll chart these skies better than any of us." Kess's eyes shone with determination. "I'll make sure we're ready for whatever comes." Night deepened, and the crew settled into uneasy rest. Yet the shadows persisted, whispered rumors, unseen watchers, the ever-present tension of a world on the brink of change. Elara lay awake, the weight of leadership settling on her like a mantle both heavy and vital. The reclaimed Skylands were a victory, yes, but one shadowed by the certainty that the skies of Skyfold would never be truly safe. New alliances would be forged, old wounds reopened, and the line between friend and foe blurred in the ever-shifting currents above. Elara closed her eyes, drawing strength from the faces of those who trusted her. Yorick, Mia, Tauren, Lena, Kees. A family forged in the clouds. Tomorrow they would face the unknown once more. And when the dawn broke over Skyfold, it would bring with it the first light of a new chapter, one where shadows persisted but hope burned brighter than ever.